Hello, Grandpa Stan from Plymouth and the CD3 GOP bringing you another Minnesota Needs to Know podcast. I'm entitling this one, Lest We Doubt, the Evidence is Pouring In. I hadn't planned on doing another podcast prior to the election, but on Friday, today is Saturday, November 2nd, but yesterday I woke up and in my emails and text messages there were 3 articles that just popped right out at me, confirming what I believe is to be the Democratic playbook for solving household budget problems, which doesn't really solve them. And I just felt I should bring this last podcast to you before the election. Now, you may remember on Tuesday, just a few days ago, my podcast talked about the top 3 issues that the voters in the Western Suburbs had called to our attention in a survey we did back in February of 2024. And those items were number 1, household budget, inflation and taxes. Number 2, crime, public safety. Number 3, K-12 education. With respect to the household budget issue, I laid out in that podcast what I believe to be the DFL playbook. And when it comes to inflation and budgetary problems around the household budget, the steps that the DFL puts in place seem to be very predictable. The first thing they do is regulate. This drives up the cost, but they often soften that cost message by telling the voter that it will create good union jobs and or grants to universities and NGOs. So, soften the blow. The regulation, however, drives spending, which raises the cost of the product being regulated. The spending is funded directly from the private sector, or it comes from tax increases. In either case, we, the consumer, are paying. The newly unaffordable product is then made affordable for some voters via a new subsidy program. But this subsidy program results in a further tax increase. Everybody incurs higher costs. The only question is whether you are going to be one of the new beneficiaries of the new subsidy, and if that subsidy is going to be greater than the cost of the new product. Every step in this process is inflationary. You simply cannot spend yourself to prosperity. However, you can spend other people's money in exchange for votes. Sorry to be so cynical, but that's the way I see the process working out. Now, one of these articles that I felt demonstrated the outcome of a DFL-sponsored set of legislation or regulation. What articles were they that, to me, confirmed my message to you? Well, the first article came from an organization called the Tax Foundation, a nonprofit 501c3. And they had just completed their 2025 state tax competitiveness study. And it will come as no surprise to any of us, but Minnesota came in number 44 out of 50 states for its tax friendliness. In other words, there are only 6 other states that have a worse state tax climate. Depressing, but that is where Minnesota is, and it is only going to get worse given the 40% increase in the state general fund budget that was put in place for fiscal year 2024. Well, the second article that confirmed my suspicions came from the University of West Virginia. They had completed a study on child care regulations, and Minnesota ranked 7th among 50 states for the strictest child care regulations. Now, some may say that regulation is good, but the result, undeniably, as I have said, is that the price of the regulated item, in this case child care, in Minnesota is basically reaching unaffordable levels. The strict regulations raise costs, drive certain providers out of the market, which causes even more cost increases, and which leaves our legislators, being the heroes that they want to be, the appetite to create more affordability subsidies, which are funded by we, the taxpayer. Are you getting the pattern? Okay. The final article was a headline from yesterday's Star Tribune about our energy issues. And that headline says, Excel upgrades will cost $11 billion more than expected. And if you look at the fine print, it talks about why these cost increases are outpacing budget, one of which is the switch to clean energy. We'll get back to that. And the company says that they're going to ask for a rate increase, and it'll only be a 9.6% jump in 2025 in our utility bills, 3.6% in 2026. But they go on to say, don't worry, the actual increases that we will see will be slightly less than this because the utility plans to pass on savings from federal tax credits. Now, where do these federal tax credits come from? Oh yeah, that's us, the taxpayer. Another subsidy in place. Costs going up because of regulation, subsidies putting in place to mask the cost, but the subsidies come from us. That article triggered for me a recollection about another article I'd read in the Star Tribune back in September. And that article, the headline was 2040 Goal, a Stretch for Excel Planning. Now, hopefully you'll remember that the DFL in 2023, the first session of their trifecta, passed a clean energy bill here in Minnesota. That clean energy bill says that we will generate our electricity, 80% will come from carbon-free sources by 2030, and 100% will come from carbon-free sources by 2040. A really, really ambitious and perhaps unattainable goal. And this is evidence of the fact that Excel is raising their hand saying, time out, legislators, regulators, we might have a problem reaching these goals. Off the table is going to be coal and natural gas, and currently there's a moratorium in Minnesota on nuclear. Thus, we are moving to wind and solar in a state where the sun shines about 30% of the time and the wind blows maybe about 30 to 40% of the time. Now Excel again is saying that it needs natural gas plants and perhaps several new ones to make sure Minnesota has reliable power in the dead of winter when the wind might not be blowing, the sun might not be shining, and the batteries can't hold a large enough reserve. But Keith Ellison, our Attorney General, as well as a whole group of nonprofit NGOs are saying, wait just a minute, we have a 2040 clean energy mandate to meet, and let's not divert to new natural gas backup plants. These aren't mainstream plants, these are backup plants for when wind and solar can't deliver what we need in times of emergency. Wow. Again, regulation is driving up costs, and Minnesota hasn't begun to see the massive impact this clean energy mandate is going to have on our utility bills for both consumers and businesses, the reliability of our energy and the corresponding impact on our businesses and our state's economy, and frankly, the safety of our citizens if the clean energy grid cannot meet our needs 24/7. But again, who really cares about increased costs? This regulation is creating good union jobs for the manufacture of wind turbines and solar panels and batteries. Or what? Let me think. Do the batteries come from China or here? I'll have to do some more research on that one. Energy subsidies already exist, and more will be inevitably rolled out to mask the cost for some consumers. And taxes will be assessed to cover these subsidies. I'd like to back up just to a couple of years. In March of 2023, the 3 elected representatives to state government here in Plymouth, my home, held a town hall at the Plymouth City Hall. It was on a Saturday morning. I decided I would go, hoping to ask some questions about the newly passed clean energy bill. To my disappointment, the three presenters did not take any questions. All they wanted to do was to tell us about the good things they had done in the first couple of months of the new DFL trifecta. The representatives were Representative Ned Carroll from the western portion of Plymouth, Jenny Clavehorn from the eastern portion of Plymouth, and Senator Bonnie Westland covering all of our Senate District 42. Given that I was very concerned about this new clean energy mandate by 2040, I did a little bit of pre-meeting research. All three of these representatives had made climate change a priority in their 2022 election campaigns. In fact, Bonnie Westland had a statement on her website that said, "We are in the midst of a climate collapse." Wow. Well, I was curious to know if these three climate change advocates walked the talk or were more of the rules for thee but not for me types. I visited the homes of Ned and Jenny, as well as the townhome of Bonnie, which she had recently sold. Much to my surprise, I saw no solar panels on these homes. Wow. Then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be interesting if I arrived at the town hall meeting 45 minutes early so I could see just what type of vehicle Ned, Jenny, and Bonnie arrived in? I thought if we were in the midst of like a climate collapse, surely they would all drive up in an EV, or at least a hybrid. But no. Much to my surprise, Ned drove up in a gas-powered Ford, Jenny in a gas-powered Honda, and Bonnie in a gas-powered Audi. Well, my point is that the clean energy bill here in Minnesota, passed by the DFL in 2023, is unknowingly expensive and perhaps dangerous for Minnesotans. I am all in favor of a clean environment. I'm all in favor of stemming global warming. That's not the point. But the clean energy bill represents a knee-jerk approach to the climate challenge. Governing and leading and solving problems requires thoughtful action. If you want to lose weight, you don't stop eating. You develop a diet that sustains the body through the transition. As an oncologist once told me, it's easy to kill the cancer. However, the trick is to keep the patient alive while killing the cancer. We must address climate change, but it must be addressed in a thoughtful and comprehensive fashion that does not break the bank nor put Minnesotans at risk. We need some balance and common sense in state government. That is why it is so important that the Republicans here in Minnesota gain control of the Minnesota House and/or the Minnesota Senate. Bringing thoughtful discussion and dialogue to our legislature is so important. It's important to all of us, whether we're Republicans, Democrats, or Independents. Let's all vote on Tuesday the 5th. Let's vote Republican to restore balance and common sense in Minnesota and in America. Thanks for listening. Grandpa Stan.